Hey guys, my name is Jack Howard. I am the head of partnerships at Payability. We are proud to be launching our guest experts video series where we bring on the top Amazon, Walmart, and Shopify minds. Whether you're a top producing seller, an aspirational seller with a unique brand, and or one of the top vendors, service providers, repricing tools, logistics companies, funding companies. The goal of this is to talk about top emerging trends as well as emerging concepts in the space to help you, and whether you're a seller, a service provider, stay up to date with everything going on in the ever-changing e-commerce space. As we all know, in the year 2021, we saw over $14 billion of institutional money flow into the space for the likes of aggregators, service providers, etc. And the reality of it is it's a result of your hard work, but also just the fast growing need for e-commerce, and e-commerce as a solution to create more efficiencies in the consumer marketplace. So we hope you find each and every interview unique and insightful. And again, if you have any questions about growth capital solutions, feel free to look us up at www.payability.com. All the best. Enjoy. Good afternoon. Happy Friday to everybody in the Payability seller community. Welcome to episode 1 of our new video series, where we bring in leaders of emerging and established e-commerce businesses to provide our user base, you, the sellers, with all the latest trends, tips, and also tools to help e-commerce entrepreneurs like yourselves effectively scale. Today, I am joined by Dillon Carter from Aura. Dillon is one of the founders at GoAura.com, an advanced but easy to use repricing tool for Amazon sellers that's been growing very fast since its launch. Dillon, welcome and thanks for being here. I feel like every day there's a new tech-driven tool to help e-commerce businesses that comes to market. I know you all have a lot going on. You're involved in a couple of Amazon focused businesses and e-commerce businesses. Would love you to, just have you start off by telling us more about GoAura, how it all started, and what you all have been up to recently.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I'll compress a handful of years into a few sentences here if I can. So I used to be a wholesale Amazon seller. That was my main focus in college, and enjoyed that. I was at 6 figures, wanting to scale to 7, and basically hitting up everybody I could who I knew was doing 7 figures, doing wholesale on Amazon on Instagram. I was just DMing everybody saying, hey, I'll pay you for your time. And one person responded back and said, hey, love to talk to you. Don't worry about the money. Let's just kind of, have fun and talk for 30 minutes. And conversation went super well. We started meeting once a week, kind of like a little mastermind, holding each other accountable. And that person would eventually become my co-founder, James. And he ended up being a actual software engineer in college, which is fantastic if you want to start a software company. And that's what we did. We started, with a simple tool. It was a CRM tool for Amazon wholesale sellers. It was basically taking the process that we had independently formed using Trello and Google Sheets to manage our processes and making it into a web app. So we learned a ton with that and eventually pivoted into repricing. We decided we wanted a bigger technical challenge, and we wanted to solve a larger problem for sellers. And we realized at the time, the best thing we could have done and did do was build a modern repricing tool that was easy to use, still complex in terms of what you can get done, but isn't overwhelming, and had a good affordability rate, right? So it wasn't super expensive, it wasn't super cheap. You got good features, you got the performance without having to pay an arm and a leg for it. And we bootstrapped the company, and we've been growing super fast. We're a small team, and so eventually I shut down my Amazon business, tripled down on the software side, and we've just been growing ever since.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's always a great you know time to hear. Again, for payability, we're a bootstrap business ourselves, so all of the pain points and really understanding from a customer's perspective as to um, you know what the needs are in the space. It's refreshing to share that with you. So would love to also educate myself on this. I've been in the Amazon space for 2 years. Could you go into a little bit of broader depth as to what repricing is and why it's important?
Sure. Yeah. So everybody knows the buy box, right? Super important. It's like the first term you learn when jumping into Amazon outside of FBA, of course. So 82% roughly of organic sales are coming in through the buy box, right? For private label sellers, this isn't really a problem because you're the only seller on a listing. However, if you're doing retail arbitrage, if you're doing online arbitrage, if you're doing wholesale, most likely you have competition on each of these listings. And the competition tends to be fierce, right? Sometimes you get lucky and you're like, great, there's only one other seller on this thing. We're good here. But a lot of times there's 20, 30, 50 people on a listing. I've seen 120 for books as an example. So you run into a problem where you want to increase sales. How do you do that? Well, you need to be in the buy box more. Okay, but how do you do that now, right? You get to a point where when you start to scale your Amazon business, you do not have the time to manually reprice your inventory. And by manually reprice, what a lot of sellers do is they log into their account, they go match buy box, match buy box, match buy box, and they repeat this thing for all their SKUs. And they do it once a day. They're like, it's fine. The problem there, though, is as you add more SKUs, more units of inventory, the number of opportunities for you to actually have a sale diminishes dramatically. Because you can't just sit there and say, okay, once a day, I'm going to do this and be good. It's like when you match the buy box once a day, that opportunity that you just created might only last for 5 minutes. Right. And now you have the rest of the 24-hour period that you're missing out on potential sales, right? And so when you start talking about, obviously payability, we're talking about capital a little bit. A lot of sellers say, hey, I need to go raise money. And that there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of sellers end up having quote unquote stale inventory, and they're leaving tons of liquidity in the business because they're just unwilling to stay competitive essentially. So what repricing does is it allows you to connect to your seller central account and say, hey, this is my algorithm, this is my rule set, follow this 24/7. And so every time there's a price change on one of your listings, we get a notification. We run that against the algorithm and say, should we submit a price change? Yes or no? If we do, we immediately do that. And then we wait for the next one. So there's a lot of opportunity to increase the opportunity, if you will, for potential sales. So we tend to see a 20 to 40% increase in sales for sellers going towards repricing where they previously didn't have it. And this is incredibly important for, if you look at it as a compound equation, right? Increasing 20 to 40% of your sales month over month over a year adds up to a great deal of growth. So for us, there's efficiency-based tools, right? You have tools that help you do something better, and then you have effectiveness-based tools. Repricing is certainly one of those effectiveness-based tools, meaning it doesn't take something that you're manually doing and helping you do it more efficiently. It's effectively increasing your sales. And so overall, fundamentally speaking, repricing is designed to help you increase your sales and make sure that you're staying competitive in the market.
That's very insightful. A question for you, because there obviously, as I mentioned, there seems to be a new tool coming to market, whether it's a repricing tool, a AI advertising PPC related tool.
Yeah.
I'd love to understand how you guys really differentiate yourselves from the Eva.gurus,
Sure.
the Repricer Expresses. I think one of the things that really stands out from just my general knowledge of your business and why I think you all have gotten so much traction is this AI component. Can you talk about how you guys not only stack up against the competition, but how you guys are leveraging AI to reprice your seller's inventory?
Sure. Yeah. So there's two kind of levels here. Let's go to the foundational side of what differentiates us. There's an interesting trend that happens where, at least in the Amazon space, where a seller becomes, they do well in business, they have some money, and they say, hey, I'm going to go build a software. And they're not technically inclined. And so they just go build a thing and they're like, hey, it's amazing, but nobody really knows the technical side of it. And then you have people on the flip side come in that have the technical know-how, but don't understand what it means to be an Amazon seller. There's a lot of ups and downs, right? And so we're in a unique position where both James, my co-founder, and myself have been high-level Amazon sellers, but James is also actually a software engineer, like a full stack, can do front end, back end, all the fun, nerdy stuff. So nothing's outsourced with us. We built it in-house and we understand the impact we're able to have. So when we got started, and I already kind of mentioned this briefly, there was a few like major pillars for us. One was we wanted to take repricing, which even for me as a prior seller was very daunting and overwhelming to consider. We wanted to take this thing that is repricing, which is technically complex, and make it easy to use and friendly in terms of like the user interface, like jumping in, like you can jump in and within 10 minutes be up and repricing. That's fantastic, right? So we're trying to reduce some of the decision fatigue, but also enable you to get as complex as you want to become. And that takes time, obviously. So that's one thing, we wanted it to be user friendly. Number two, customer support. Listen, the Amazon world loves virtual assistants and there's nothing wrong with it. But when it comes to real support, so when I'm thinking back about being a seller myself and jumping into other tools, I always felt alone. There was so much that could be done that I wanted to get done, the outcomes that I wanted, but I just felt like I had to figure it out myself, and that wasn't fun. And so when we got started, we were advised to hire VAs in the Philippines to handle support. We went against that advice and actually did support myself as a founder for the first 2 years. We got it dialed in so that when a new user jumps in, when a new seller starts with us, they're not alone. And we make that very blatantly obvious. If you need help, we got you covered. We got documentation, we got videos, right? We'll jump into a Zoom call with you. And nothing's outsourced. Finn, who's literally sitting over there at his desk right now, is doing support. This is in-house. So for us, it's like, okay, if we can make it easy to use and we can hardcore support you and make you feel like you got this and you're a power user from day one, you're already set up for success. And then number three, really the price. We want it to be affordable. I want to be cheap enough to where when you're getting started as a seller, there's a lot of tools that are just kind of out of your reach, right? It's $500 to get started. And you're like, that's kind of a big leap for me, but it would add value and have ROI right now. So we wanted a price point that was low enough for newer sellers to get started when it makes sense, which for us, we tend to say around 25 SKUs or $5,000 per month in consistent sales. If you're hitting those, you need to start having that discussion with yourself and deciding if you want to move forward. But if you're at that point, it's cheap enough for you to get started, but it also becomes cheaper as you scale, right? So we're $97 a month, single tiered. We don't charge you more as you grow. And that's for 50,000 repricing SKUs per month. So, we have sellers that are doing $10,000 a month on the platform. We also have sellers that do 3 million a month on the platform. So that for us was super important because there's a lot of sellers that put off, including myself back in the day, who put off certain things that would immediately have a massive impact on the business growth. And now we've started to pull that back. Now on the AI side, you have this interesting thing with terms in the repricing space, right? Is it rule-based? Is it algorithmic? What's the difference here? There is no difference. A algorithm is a collection of rules. So, hey, listen, a lot of us do marketing. I get it. We love to use these kind of crazy terms. So we do offer algorithmic repricing. There is game theory-based repricing, AI-based repricing strategies. That's its own separate thing. So when we talk about AI powered, we're talking at our infrastructure level. What we did is we used machine learning specifically at our server level to increase performance and speed. So we do some interesting load balancing things as well. So if we notice that one of your SKUs, as an example, the demand for it's going up, the competition, should I say, is going up for it, and meaning that like you need to reprice even quicker, we're able to shift some of our resources over to that SKU and away from SKUs that are less competitive to kind of even the odds a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're doing that 24/7. When we're talking AI-based repricing strategies, we're not quite there yet, and I can explain that. I've yet to kind of see a specific model that makes sense. The world loves the term AI right now. We actually joke about it a ton in the company because it's like, oh, cool, an AI-based note-taking app. It's like, but you're still writing the note. Like, what? There's nothing artificial intelligence based in here, right? So we want to be careful with the terms that we're reading and really understand what is truly being done here, because AI, machine learning, deep learning, all these terms are incredibly wide-ranging and broad. When you start diving into the nerdiness of it, you got broad AI, narrow AI, what's actually possible in technology right now. It's a whole world. So for us, until we can realistically see a model that outperforms, we're just not going to ship it.
Yeah. So you brought up a lot of interesting points. And I think the greatest, and again, I've been in the Amazon space for 2 years, the amounts of money in terms of capital, whether it's into the aggregators, into funding companies like Payability for the Amazon seller to go out and purchase inventory, invest in some of these tools to help them grow, et cetera. I've always come to find that the most effective businesses, and again, this is just based on conversations I've had, are the businesses that are by the seller for the seller, in the sense that, you yourself and your business partner, James, you all have built a 6-figure Amazon business yourself. And now you are saying, hey, these are the pain points that we dealt with. Everybody understands Amazon and the empire that Jeff Bezos has built, but not as many people up until, the last 18 months really understood the value of the community and the providers within the space. And I think, for what you guys are doing is you guys are leveraging, not only your knowledge, but also this, very hot term AI to essentially allow your sellers the access to keep up with the trends in regards to demand for certain SKUs, so they can continue focusing on certain parts of their business that require time. And you all can, empower these sellers to remain competitive in regards to price, so inventory doesn't remain stale. Very fascinating. I've already learned a lot myself from this, and it's just it's a pleasure to be learning about this. My next question for you, I want to go away from recommended strategies for a second, and we'll get to that in a minute on the repricing side. But how do you think repricing plays a larger role in the Amazon growth stack itself? And then I'm gonna add a follow-up question to that, just in light of one of the themes of this Amazon aggregation and all of this money being poured into purchasing, scaling Amazon brands on the marketplace. How would a repricing tool like Aura help a seller that is just starting out essentially grow to that point of exit?
Yeah, it's a great question. I like crossing into different industries because you learn some terminologies and you get some interesting frameworks and perspective shifts. If you look at the world of startups, which we very much consider ourselves to be in, especially in the software side, you have these stacks, and a stack is just a collection of software systems you use. So you might have a growth stack, you might have a finance stack, an operations stack. I want to bring this term to the Amazon world because I think it lends perspective in terms of how you view your business. I've always said, a business is a collection of systems, but you really need to understand, even if you're just a business of one, what areas these systems exist in. So for most Amazon resellers in private label as well, it breaks down very simply, right? You have sourcing, you have the logistics, which might be, prep, it might be, importing, right? But then you have sales on the back end. Ultimately, that's your entire business, right? So it might not be necessarily just sales, it might be sales and marketing if you're doing private label. Even with wholesale, I used to run PPC ads to my wholesale inventory. RA, OA, you're probably not going to do that as much, but you still have to get sales. And so I think a lot of sellers just default to, well, I'm on Amazon.com, I use FBA, sales are handled for me. It's like, yes and no, it's not that binary. You are set up for sales, but are you taking 100% advantage of the opportunities to get each individual sale. Most sellers are not. And so what I tend to recommend is break each of these three pillars, if you will, of these three stages into its own collection, and then pinpoint the areas that would have the biggest ROI, the biggest impact, right? So I always say you have the biggest growth lever in a business and then the biggest bottleneck. You need to figure out what those two things are and then execute against them. So for a lot of sellers, they just list, throw a price on it in Inventory Lab, and then forget about it. And they go, Amazon will take care of this. Maybe, maybe not, right? I mean, just because you listed it at $35 doesn't mean that it's going to sell there, right? We know that, I mean, listen, if you look at any listing over a period of time, the buy box is going to fluctuate. So you need to be able to fluctuate with it. This is basic supply and demand economics kind of stuff. So for a lot of sellers, I tend to ask, what's your growth stack? Like what things do you use, whether it's a software or a framework or a process even, right? Simple rules such as, if I don't sell it after 30 days, I do something to move it to keep my capital back, right? Liquidity matters in the Amazon world. And a lot of sellers can't really answer that question. So for me, a simple one that even I, as a founder of a repricing tool, pushed off far too long is have a repricing tool active on my account. It's such a simple thing. It's what's interesting is, we've made it so not expensive and so simple to jump in and get set up and moving with that. So let me back up a track here. We also offer a feature called Workflows. Workflows is essentially a automated rule builder for your account. So I'm a huge fan of like Zapier and Siri shortcuts on my iPhone. We have triggers and we have actions. So not only are we automating your price updates, we're automating the task of managing your SKUs, your listings in the account itself based on what you want. So you might say when a new listing comes in, automatically assign, strategy A, and then toggle it on. And if we're going to automatically pull in your costs from Inventory Lab, we're going to automatically calculate your min price, right? So you can create this nice structure to where all you're doing is spending your time on sourcing, shipping in that inventory, and letting Aura handle the back end of the sales for you. And then you're like, I'm good, right? I just saved 4 hours a week. I'm going to go put that 4 hours a week over towards sourcing. And then imagine that compounding over time. That's incredible. So in terms of like where it sits in the stack, it's going to be in that sales growth stack, right? But don't just view repricing in this way, view the rest of the tools you're using in this space. Try to label it, right? What tools do you use to make you more effective and efficient with sourcing? Same thing with prep. Are you using a prep center or are you doing it internally? And then on the back end, how are you ensuring that you're getting the most sales possible within a time frame?
Yeah. So this is one thing I'm curious about is, in regards to the growth stack, I think, again, this costs money, right? And we ourselves work with some tools to provide funding for, a tool like GoAura, for example, somebody that might not have the capital. As we know,
Sure.
from being in both at startups, it's having access to capital at a certain stage, especially for the right amount of growth is
right.
Sometimes you don't have it or you just got it. And it's like, what do I do with all this money?
Yep.
For let's call it, a $50,000 a month Amazon arbitrage seller. What would you say are the most important techs? They can't have them all, but repricing included. What would you say are the other, tools they would need to have in the stack outside of repricing?
Yeah, this is where analytics and data becomes very important. Your Amazon business has so many data points. It's incredible. Like even not just third-party tools that like help you do some more advanced things, which we can talk about. And that's kind of where I'm going here, but just even in your Seller Central account, I mean, there's so much. One of the biggest things I did that really helped me grow with my wholesale business, and it's very similar to RAOA, is breaking down where is my revenue coming from? What's my 80-20 here, right? If I realize that 80% of my 80% of my revenue is coming from one supplier, I should make sure that that relationship is strong because if they decide, hey, this isn't working out for us anymore, I just lost 80% of my revenue overnight. You can do something similar with RAOA, right? If you're spending that kind of capital, you need to understand where am I having the biggest impact, right? You might realize that you're sourcing from one geolocation that has a much higher ROI than another, but you're spending 70% of your time in the less, profitable area. Maybe we need to make that decision change. It could be, based on the store, right? It comes down to a lot of different things, but you need to start really looking at the mechanics of it as well, right? So I realized when I was struggling, because I had figured out the sourcing aspect and it really became a capital problem. And this is before I actually started, going and using Payability myself. I was using you guys for instant payouts, but this is like prior to advances and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I realized that one area I could do outside of raising capital was I could increase my average net profit per unit. And I could do that by taking my lowest ROI SKU or supplier and replacing it with a brand new one that's twice as high, right? So you start to make some interesting, almost managerial accounting based decisions, which is basically just like two situations, which one's more profitable based on the math, go that route and move forward.
Yeah, I've learned more so, especially in the retail arbitrage and drop shipping space, sellers pay so much attention to the margin down to the penny.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And the pushback I used to get when I was working on the sales side at Payability was that fee is, just like a 0.5 percentage point too high,
right, exactly.
Way too much in my margin. So yep. I guess I want to leave it with this. My question to you is, where do you see, and answer this maybe in 1 to 2 sentences, where do you see the supply chain, which was a nightmare in 2021, huge headache for our sellers. I'm sure, same thing for you all. Where do you see things going in the next 12 months? Is there improvement?
Yeah. It's a good question. We've actually been talking to a lot of brands ourselves, not just Amazon based, but just, regular physical product brands that were having this problem. And a lot of them are looking for alternatives in terms of locations for sourcing from suppliers, right? They're not just defaulting to certain countries. They're kind of going a little bit broad, as well as considering, is it worth the added cost to manufacture in the United States? Yeah. This is becoming more of a conversation. And I don't think it's just that, right? It's like, is it worth the added cost because the hedge, blah, 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 but also, is there going to be more investment coming into manufacturing because of, right? So what's the second order effect here? I would place a small bet, maybe not a large one, because, obviously I don't know, but I would place a small bet on more funding and capital, like VC, private equity kind of capital coming into the manufacturing space in the United States and saying, cool, what can we do to automate and to lower the cost of production here? Maybe now we start to, be a little bit more competitive from a cost perspective. And even if that doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily transition a lot of our sourcing to the United States, I think it's going to shift just a bit the allocation, if you will. Outside of that, it's hard to say. I think we'll end up having a lot of, transportation automation coming online. We've seen a lot of that in terms of, Tesla's semi truck. You're seeing a lot of these things become real world now, and really not just a proof of concept, right? These are real full loads, cross country, fully autonomous. I think we'll start to see that come to shipping overseas in terms of like oceanic transfer as well. You're already seeing some interesting startups that are doing autonomous, like barges, and they're taking that up a notch as well. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think you're right on is with this whole idea of are these Amazon sellers going to be looking to, especially in the private label space, going to be looking to source and manufacture their products in the United States. That was my big suggestion around these supply chain issues with James DeHardo from Merchant Spring was, at the end of the day, when there are problems, whether it's a company, an individual, sometimes you have to be as creative as possible to get over the hump and get through the problem. And, if there's such a slowdown in getting goods from Asia, why not just manufacture them in the United States and find a way how? So, Dillon, it was a pleasure being able to have you here today and really looking forward to sharing this with our base of sellers at large. With that in mind, do want to also note that we are including a link from Dillon and the Aura team for a 14-day trial, as well as a month free for the Go Aura repricing tool using the code PAY2022. I have included that right here below, and we'll also be including that in the info link on YouTube itself. Anyway, guys, have a great weekend. And Dillon, thanks so much again for your time.
Jack, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right.
It's me again. I hope you guys enjoyed the valuable insights that were provided in this recent episode. As always, if you are interested in receiving accelerated daily payouts, feel free to complete a credit check free application with us at www.payability.com. It takes all of 3 to 5 minutes and a couple of clicks of the button. Our providers and partners are experts across everything from repricing, logistics, as well as automation and PPC. Our goal is to provide you with insights as well as contacts within these companies. So if you guys have needs anywhere outside of Payability, please feel free to check out our preferred partners page at www.payability.com/partners.